The cold emptiness of space stretched endlessly around the Starhawk, broken only by the distant glimmers of distant stars. Captain Lyra Kane stood at the railing of the command deck, her eyes fixed on the dark shapes appearing at the edge of the Epsilon rift. The sensors had picked them up minutes ago, but now there was no denying the truth. Thousands of alien ships, sleek and black, moved like a storm across the void, their energy cores glowing ominously. This was the Zitherian fleet, an enemy humanity had never faced before. Every officer on the bridge moved with precision, but the tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Lyra's heart pounded. She had trained for countless scenarios, each more dangerous than the last, yet nothing had prepared her for this. She glanced at her commanding officer, Commander Voss, who stood rigid by the tactical display. His face was set, the kind of stern expression that demanded obedience and calm, even when the world was about to shatter. "Lyra," he said, his voice cutting through the hum of machinery, "remember the drills. No species can dual-wield. Focus on one weapon, master it, and survive. That's how we operate. That's how humans survive." Lyra's jaw tightened. She had heard it countless times during training, the warning that had become almost a mantra for young cadets. Dual-wielding was considered reckless. It was unpredictable. It was dangerous. But Lyra knew something that Voss and the older officers had forgotten. Humans were not bound by the same limitations as others. Instinct, adaptability, and ingenuity ran in their veins. She let her eyes drift to the weapons she had prepared, 2 plasma blades, one glowing blue, the other red. They were sleek, perfectly balanced, forged from materials scavenged and refined in secret labs. Every line, every curve was her own design. She ran her fingers over the hilts, feeling the hum of energy within. A familiar warmth that calmed her mind and sharpened her focus. A warning alarm pierced the tension. A sharp, urgent tone that made everyone jump. The Zitherians had fired the first volley. A wave of green energy tore through the asteroid field near the edge of the human defense line. The rocks exploded in a shower of debris, some fragments striking the shields of the Starhawk and shaking the entire vessel. Red warning lights bathed the bridge as the ship's AI announced, shields holding at 60%. Incoming strike in 23 seconds. Recommend evasive maneuvers. Lyra didn't wait for commands. Her mind raced, calculating angles, velocities, and escape paths in milliseconds. She had always been faster than most, able to see the moves of an opponent before they even decided them. The Zitherians were deadly, but they were predictable in ways that humans could exploit. Even as the bridge crew scrambled, issuing commands, Lyra's focus was elsewhere. She had to prepare. This was her moment. She vaulted over the railing and sprinted across the command deck, boots clanging against the metal floor. Officers and crew shifted out of her way, startled, but accustomed to her boldness. She reached the hangar bay, where the boarding pods waited like sleek predators, ready to launch into the heart of the enemy fleet. Each pod was a marvel of human engineering, small and nimble enough to dodge energy fire, yet strong enough to hold several soldiers and their weapons. Lyra's strike team, a hand-picked group of humans trained for rapid infiltration and combat, waited at the pods. They all knew her reputation, and a flicker of admiration passed through their eyes as they noticed her dual blades strapped to her back. "Are you sure about this, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Remai, a sharp-eyed pilot who had flown through asteroid storms that could tear a ship apart. "You know Voss's rules." Lyra smiled, just a little, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "Define can't," she said simply, checking her grip and scanning the approaching enemy ships. The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of certainty. A challenge not just to Ramai, but to every limit anyone had ever set on humanity. The Zitherians closed in, their ships moving with terrifying speed and precision. Every strike they launched was calculated, designed to overwhelm human defenses. Energy beams cut through space, leaving trails of destruction in their wake. Debris from shattered asteroids drifted dangerously close to the Starhawk, and the bridge crew's voices became a blur of urgent orders and panicked shouts. Lyra ignored the chaos. Her mind was sharp, focused on what mattered, taking the fight to the enemy. She climbed into the first boarding pod, her strike team following close behind. The hatch sealed, and the pod's engines hummed with raw power, vibrating against her back as the countdown began. Outside, the Zitherian fleet seemed endless, a wall of black metal and deadly energy. Inside, Lyra felt the familiar thrill that came only with combat, a mixture of fear and excitement that made her senses sharper than ever. She could hear her own heartbeat, steady and strong. A rhythm matched the pulse of her blade's dot as the pod shot out of the Starhawk, slicing through space at impossible speed. Lyra took a moment to look at the stars streaking past. This was humanity's moment, the moment they had trained for, the moment the universe would remember. The Zitherians thought humans were limited, fragile, and bound by rules. They had no idea that humans could bend the impossible, that a single human could stand against overwhelming odds and survive. Lyra gritted her teeth and whispered to herself, "Let's show them what humans can do." The pod hurtled toward the enemy fleet, weaving through beams of energy and fragments of rock. Each second brought them closer to the flagship, the heart of the Zitherian command. Lyra's strike team prepared for boarding, weapons humming, minds focused, every instinct ready for the fight. Outside, the void of space was silent in its vastness, but inside the pod, tension crackled like a live wire. Lyra felt it, felt the energy of her team, and knew that they could do what others said was impossible. She gripped her blades, feeling their weight, feeling their power. And as the pod neared the flagship, she whispered once more, louder this time, "Define can't." The Zitherians would soon find out. The boarding pod slammed against the hull of the Zitherian flagship with a jolt that threw Lyra Kane forward, her hands gripping the controls as alarms blared. The exterior lights flickered green and red, casting eerie shadows over the sleek, alien metal. Around her, her strike team tumbled out of their seats, weapons drawn, ready for the chaos that awaited them. The airlock hissed and opened, revealing the interior of the flagship, a labyrinth of metal corridors, glowing conduits, and ominous shadows. The smell of ozone and burning circuits filled the air. Lyra's blue and red plasma blades hummed to life in her hands, casting long arcs of light that danced across the walls. They were perfect extensions of her will, her instincts guiding them as she moved. Ahead, the Zitherians waited. Their forms were terrifying tall, muscular creatures with chitinous armor, clawed limbs and eyes that glowed like molten green fire. Their weapons were alien and deadly, firing bolts of concentrated energy that scorched metal and melted the floor. But Lyra had faced impossible odds before. She tightened her grip, her heart steady, and moved forward. The first enemy lunged. A massive Zetherian swinging a clawed arm, its energy weapon slashing the corridor. Lyra reacted instinctively, spinning her blue blade to parry the strike while her red blade sliced across the creature's side. Sparks flew as metal and energy collided, and the Zetherian hissed in pain, surprised by the speed and precision of a human wielding two weapons at once. Lyra rolled forward, sweeping her blades in a wide arc, striking another attacker before it could react. Around her, her team fought fiercely, using grenades, plasma rifles, and improvised weapons to hold the aliens at bay. The corridors were narrow, but humans thrived in such chaos. Lyra led her team through twists and turns, luring the Zitherians into traps and bottlenecks. One moment, a ceiling panel collapsed, sending sparks and debris raining down. The next, A plasma blast from Lieutenant Ramai's rifle sent an enemy crashing into a wall. Humans had no natural advantage in size or strength, but they had ingenuity. Every move was calculated, every action a blend of courage and creativity. Even when a Zitherian grabbed a team member, Lyra's blade flashed, slicing through armor to free them. The aliens recoiled, unsure how to deal with such unpredictability. Time was critical. Every second spent inside the flagship brought the Zitherians closer to destroying the colony world below. Lyra's team pressed onward, navigating a maze of glowing hallways and ventilation shafts, sometimes crawling, sometimes leaping across gaps created by explosions. She could hear the shouts of the enemy, guttural and angry. But there was no fear in her voice or her team's. Humans were dangerous because they refused to stop, refused to surrender, refused to follow rules that limited others. They adapted, learned, and exploited every weakness. At the heart of the flagship, the central command chamber loomed, a massive dome filled with alien machinery, pulsing with green energy. From the shadows emerged the warlord, taller than any Zitherian Lyra had seen, its 4 arms each wielding a weapon. Its eyes glowed brighter, filled with fury, as it advanced toward her. Lyra stepped forward, blades ready, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Every human in her team took a position around her, forming a protective circle as the warlord approached. The fight began with a clash that shook the floor. Lyra's blue blade met one of the warlord's weapons, sparks flying as energy collided. In an instant, her red blade found a gap in the enemy's armor, striking with precision and power. The warlord's movements were fast and deadly, but Lyra's instincts, honed by years of training and countless drills, allowed her to anticipate and counter. She spun, ducked, and leaped, her dual blades a blur of red and blue light. The Zitherian's 4 arms moved in a coordinated assault, but Lyra's agility and creativity kept her ahead, turning the enemy's strength into a vulnerability around her. The human strike team fought with everything they had. One soldier hacked a control panel, sending a surge of energy through the warlord's weapons, causing them to spark and misfire. Another planted a charge that exploded against the machinery supporting the ceiling, forcing the warlord to dodge falling debris. Every human action was a gamble, a test of courage and ingenuity, and every gamble paid off. The Zitherians were powerful, but they had never faced an enemy like this. Small, relentless, unpredictable. Lyra's mind worked like a machine. She noted the warlord's pattern, the way its left arms moved slightly slower than the right, the moments when it overextended during attacks. She exploited every opening, striking with one blade while blocking with the other, moving faster than the eye could follow. One of her blades caught a critical joint in the enemy's armor, sending a shower of sparks into the chamber. The warlord roared, staggered, and struck back with even more fury, but Lyra was ready. She ducked, rolled, and countered, striking with a precision that seemed impossible. The battle was exhausting, each moment a test of skill, courage, and endurance. Lyra felt sweat run down her face, muscles burning, but she refused to falter. She thought of the colony below, of the families who depended on her, and of humanity's stubborn spirit. Humans were often underestimated. They were seen as fragile, limited, and bound by rules. But in moments like this, when the impossible stood before them, humans adapted. They survived. They fought. They conquered. Finally, with a burst of strength and a calculated leap, Lyra spun through the air, her red blade striking the central core of the warlord's armor, while her blue blade deflected a final desperate attack. Sparks erupted, energy flared, and the warlord crashed to the floor, defeated. Around her, the strike team cheered, though exhaustion and relief were etched on every face. The flagship shook violently, alarms blaring, as systems failed one by one. Lyra steadied herself, blades still glowing, breathing heavily. Even as they celebrated, she knew the fight was not entirely over. The human ingenuity that had carried them through this battle would be tested again. But for now, the impossible had been achieved. Lyra had wielded 2 blades against a foe that was supposed to be unbeatable. Humans had shown once again that courage, creativity, and determination could overcome the most powerful enemies. The Zitharians had underestimated them, and that mistake had cost them dearly. Lyra looked around at her team, at the battlefield of sparks and twisted metal, and felt a surge of pride. They were human, and they had done what no one else could. They had faced the impossible and emerged victorious. And though the cost had been high, the victory proved a truth that could not be denied. Humans were strong, resilient, and dangerous, especially when they refused to accept limits. The Zitharian flagship shook violently as Lyra Kane and her strike team navigated through the crumbling corridors. Explosions echoed in the distance and sparks rained from the damaged ceiling, casting an eerie green glow on twisted metal and broken consoles. Every moment was tense, every step a risk, but Lyra's focus never wavered. The warlord had been defeated, but the flagship was far from neutralized. Systems were failing, fires burned unchecked, and alarms screamed a constant warning of imminent collapse. Yet even in the chaos, humanity's resolve did not falter. Every human aboard the pod, every soldier, engineer, and pilot, understood that their actions now would decide the fate of millions below. Lyra led her team through the shattered corridors, her dual blades humming in the dim light. Each swing of her weapons cut through debris, each arc of energy cleared a path forward. The Zitharians still fought, smaller squads pressing back in desperate attempts to hold the humans at bay. Lyra's team moved as one, each member aware of their role, each action precise and calculated. Humans were not the strongest or the fastest in the galaxy, but they had an advantage no one could predict: adaptability. They learned on the fly, exploited weaknesses, and refused to give up. Lyra's blue blade deflected a sweeping strike from a clawed arm, while her red blade found a weak joint in another enemy's armor, sending it tumbling into the wall. The Zitharians shrieked, confused and enraged. No species had ever moved like this. No species had ever combined speed, strategy, and improvisation in such deadly harmony. Outside the walls of the flagship, the human fleet pressed their attack. Starfighters darted between massive alien ships, dodging green energy beams and returning fire with a precision honed by countless simulations and real battles. Engineers aboard the larger vessels hacked into alien systems, turning their weapons against them, while gunners focused on the weak points Lyra's team reported in real time. Humans had transformed the battlefield into a chaotic ballet, a storm of fire and light, and the Zitharians struggled to adapt. Ships exploded, leaving fiery trails that streaked across space, and the vacuum seemed to roar with the sound of human determination. Back inside the flagship, Lyra reached the central command core, a massive room filled with glowing machinery and pulsing energy conduits. Sparks leapt from broken consoles, and the floor vibrated under the strain of internal explosions. The last remaining Zitharian officers attempted to defend the core, but Lyra's team pressed forward with relentless force. She moved faster than the eye could follow, her blades a blur of red and blue, deflecting enemy attacks and striking with precision. Every move was calculated, yet instinctive. She had become one with her weapons, a single force capable of defeating what should have been impossible. As Lyra advanced, she felt the weight of the battle pressing on her chest. Not just the physical exhaustion, but the responsibility. Millions of lives depended on them. The colony world below would burn if they failed. She glanced at her team, seeing their exhaustion mirrored in their eyes, yet also their determination. Every human around her understood the stakes. There was no fear that could stop them, only focus, courage, and the relentless will to survive. Suddenly, the central core shuddered violently, and alarm screamed across the ship. The energy conduits were destabilizing, threatening to explode and tear the flagship apart. The remaining Zetherians hesitated, unsure whether to fight or flee, and Lyra saw the opportunity. With a nod to her team, she surged forward, weaving through a hail of energy, fire, and debris. Her dual blades met the enemy's last desperate attacks, each strike precise, each block perfect. Humans were small, yes, and fragile in many ways, but they had an advantage the Zetherians could never overcome: creativity in the face of danger, courage in the face of death. The final confrontation was near. The core itself loomed before them, pulsing with unstable energy. Lyra knew what needed to be done. With a shout that echoed across the chamber, she leaped into the air, spinning with her blades extended. One blade found a weak point in the core's support structure, while the other deflected a final desperate strike from a Zetherian soldier. Sparks flew, energy flared, and the core shuddered violently before collapsing, sending a shockwave through the chamber. Humans were thrown to the ground, but Lyra landed on her feet, blades still humming. Breathing heavy but steady, the flagship began to collapse. Fires spread rapidly, hallways buckled, and the alien vessel tilted dangerously. Lyra's team retreated, covering each other as they moved back toward the exit pods. Outside, the human fleet watched as the flagship's energy core detonated, sending a massive shockwave into the void. Several smaller Zetherian ships were destroyed in the blast, their crews unprepared for the sheer audacity and ingenuity of humans. The battle that had seemed impossible just hours ago was now turning in humanity's favor. As the humans regrouped in orbit above the colony world, Lyra looked out at the battlefield. Smoke and fire stretched across space, but the Zetherians were retreating, their fleet broken and disorganized. The human forces had won, but at a cost. Ships were damaged, lives were lost, and the scars of battle were visible everywhere. Yet in the midst of destruction, there was triumph and, above all, a lesson that no one would forget. Humanity could face impossible odds, adapt, and survive. They could wield what no one thought possible and turn the tide of battle. Lyra finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. Commander Voss appeared beside her, his face solemn but impressed. "I underestimated you, Kane," he admitted. "No species could dual-wield." "Until now?" Lyra smiled faintly, blood and sweat streaking her face. "Maybe it wasn't the species," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Maybe it was the human heart." Around her, her strike team nodded, understanding what she meant. Humans were not just fighters. They were creators, thinkers, and survivors. They had turned the impossible into reality. The colony world below slowly emerged from the shadows of the battle, its cities safe for now, its people unaware of the war that had raged above their heads. Lyra felt a surge of pride mixed with exhaustion. Humanity had survived not because of strength alone, not because of technology alone, but because of spirit. The Zetherians had expected humans to be predictable, limited, bound by rules and physical constraints. Instead, they had found a species that refused to accept limits. That turned instinct and creativity into weapons more deadly than any technology. In the hours after the battle, Lyra and her team helped stabilize the damaged flagship systems enough to retrieve any survivors and salvage valuable technology. Every human involved worked tirelessly, moving through smoke-filled corridors and debris-strewn hallways. They were battered and tired, yet their resolve was unbroken. Each act of courage, each small victory, contributed to a larger truth. Humans endured because they refused to stop. They adapted, they fought, and they conquered. no matter the odds. As dawn touched the colony world, casting soft light across the horizon, Lyra stood on the deck of the Starhawk, her dual blades resting at her sides. The fleet around her, battered but victorious, reflected the light in countless glimmers of steel and energy. Humanity had won, and the universe had witnessed it. The battle had been hard, and the cost had been great, but the lesson was clear. Humans were unstoppable when they refused to accept limits. Lyra smiled faintly, looking out at the stars, feeling the hum of her blades as if they shared in her pride. She had wielded 2 blades, faced the impossible, and humanity had emerged victorious. And though battles would come again, one truth remained eternal. Humans adapt. Humans endure, and humans rise. The Zetherians would remember this day. The galaxy would remember it. And Lyra Kane, standing tall amidst the wreckage, knew that humanity's spirit could never be defeated. No matter the threat, no matter the odds, they would continue to fight, to survive, and to triumph.